Welcome to the Human Conversation podcast with Jules White, the real dragon slayer, author and entrepreneur sales coach. Tune in weekly for human conversation about business and sales. Enjoy business expert interviews, educational episodes, and virtual cuppers with entrepreneur business owners. So grab yourself a cuppa and enjoy. Here is your host, Jules White.
So welcome everybody to the Human Conversation. Oh my goodness, I love making these podcasts. I've got a wonderful lady with me today, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit about her. She is Lindsey Marriott. She's the head of operational learning at a company called Ethos Farm. Now, I am super lucky that I'm working with Ethos Farm right now, and so I do an awful lot of work with Lindsey. She's super bright and intelligent, an amazing voice around leadership. And actually, that's something we definitely want to touch on today. So welcome, Lindsey, to the Human Conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. I like a human conversation. I'm not keen on conversations with AI people, to be honest.
And that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's that, I guess, the big question, because these podcasts will take us anywhere we like. But the big question is, how will we have human conversations in the future? I mean, they're saying this AI stuff is actually going to be superhuman. But right now, it's definitely not. It doesn't feel like the conversational side of AI is that human to me right now.
So I just find it super transactional. And it has its uses, let's be honest, AI has enormous uses. In fact, I've been using it today to help me just get my thoughts in order. I know what I want to say, but being able to articulate it sometimes is a bit difficult. So, but, it's useful for all sorts of things. But in terms of emotion and how you make someone feel and how you create an experience for someone, how you make someone feel valued, how AI is ever going to match, that super piece of kit we've all got in our head and in our chest, that head and heart thing.
I think you're right. We're all so beautifully unique, which I talk about a lot. Anyone who follows me knows that's what I bang on about all the time. And so the complexities of that suggest that we have to then adjust those conversations, which is part of what you and I do. This is our stuff, isn't it? Taking these individual humans, getting to the bottom of them all and saying, okay, let's work this out and find a way that you can communicate better. I guess one of the key words is communication, isn't it?
It's also about, potential, and our path to potential is so different in every single aspect. I'm an old bird now, so I'm kind of I can reflect back on my own personal path to potential. But AI by nature is process driven, and personal potential is never going to be process driven. It will be affected by a million different aspects and a million different environmental things that come at you kind of left field, and your response to that will be, as you say, entirely individual. I'm still railing against the fact that AI will never replace the human.
It will never be replaced. Listen, let's start at the beginning, Lindsey, like I like to. I want to know, what did you want to do when you left school?
Oh, you'll laugh. You will. You'll laugh because you know me now, and at the moment I'm waiting for a knee op because I can't walk very well at the moment. And what I actually wanted to do when I was coming towards the end of my school career was to be an athlete.
Amazing.
That's hilarious, isn't it? That's so funny. I'm just reflecting back on my personal potential. Missed that one, didn't I?
So no, but tell me more about that. Was it because you were super sporty at school? What was it about it, and what did you want to be an athlete in?
It was field sports. I was successful in field sports. I mean, I never had the kind of heart to run. Basically, that wasn't my thing. But I really enjoyed field sports. I was strong. And and I had a level of success in that, particularly at school. But I really just enjoyed the activity of it all. I enjoyed the meets, and I enjoyed I mean, school sports days, those kind of things. I absolutely loved all the noise and just the fun around all of that. I really enjoyed that. When you get just excited about stuff, you get that rising feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Very
Yeah.
inspiring, watching other people and so on. And the other thing I love doing, I sang a lot into my hairbrush. And I still sing. I mean, I do, to be fair, I do still sing. So if anyone meets me in the vicinity of a karaoke, well, duck, I'd say. But I love to sing. In fact, one of my plans for next year is to join a choir. So I really want to get back into singing properly. So yeah,
Yeah.
some kind of mega superstar singer would have been ideal as well.
I was part of a choir a couple of times over the years where
Yeah,
you could literally just go. You didn't have to be this great best singer, but you could
yeah,
just go, and it would be this social evening, but you would be singing at
yeah.
that social evening. It was men and women, and we would do concerts. And I loved it. And I wasn't, as I say, the best voice in the land, but I could hold a note. And
Hmm.
I just felt like it was such a lovely thing to be able to do. It's like a release, after you've been at work all day or whatever. So I totally get the singing stuff, and I'm definitely on the stage karaoke. My song is California Dreaming. Um,
Okay.
don't mess with it. And I also was really sporty, Lindsay. So I totally get this kind of the feeling around sport is really something special, I think, when you love it. So
Mm.
obviously you didn't become a famous athlete or singer. I'm guessing. Not that you've told me you did, so I'm guessing you didn't. What did you do though when you left school?
The other passion I had was teaching, because I've always had a bent towards helping other people, and teaching. Yeah, that was something that I was really interested in. Plus, our deputy head at our secondary school, her background was in teaching, and in those days she was teaching the violently maladjusted. I mean, that's how many years ago it was. But I was fascinated by the fact that there were groups of people who perhaps society had bracketed in some way or another, that people would help, would support, would help to move forward and change how they'd been bracketed. And I thought that was really interesting. She was quite inspiring, actually. She was terrifying, but she was also quite inspiring. So teaching was also something that I was really interested in. So yes, I went to college, and started to go down that path. And I think I did a year post secondary school education towards my A levels, and all of my friends had left school at 16 and gone to work, and we're all having a whale of a time. And I thought, you know what, I've had enough of this. I want to go and play and join in, which I did. And so I diverted away from that path of education and teaching and went into customer service. I went into retail.
Retail. Everybody knows I love retail. It's
Well,
in my blood, it really is.
cut me in half and I bleed customer service. And
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
exactly.
from there on, from what, 17, that's the beginning of my lifelong belief that people make the difference. Coming back right back to our original conversation, that people can really make the difference to other people, whether it be simply influencing them to buy something or just making them feel better today.
When did you get into, presumably when you started in customer service, it was actually doing the do.
Mm.
So when did you get into this sort of training, coaching side of customer service?
I don't know, maybe about 10 years or so later. So yeah, as you say, doing the do. And as usual, you move forward and you're good at what you do, so you get promoted and so on and so forth. And as soon as you move into any kind of leadership role, then that accountability for people and what you did so well, you now become accountable for helping other people to do it as well as you did. Your role changes at that point. So
Yeah.
so I think, yeah, probably as a retailer, holding, I mean, we used to have Tuesday morning half an hour training sessions. You remember those days when the shops
Yeah.
closed, didn't open till 9:30 because you had a training session, or even like morning briefings, that kind of thing. You'd get missiles from head office first thing in the morning that said, you need to open X amount of store cards today. And that would come at me as a missile. But if I then projected that to the team as a missile, nothing was going to happen. So I learned quite quickly, I think, that interpreting what needed to happen, so what the goal was, into how do you do it, and most importantly, why do you have to do it,
Yeah.
was that came about quite quickly, I think, and then you kind of gradually develop on that.
You have a formula in essence, don't you? I think that
Completely.
you find,
Yeah,
which makes sense. And it's interesting what you said about this transition from doing it and being that great person at customer service who is delivering it on the front line, to the person who's then leading the team and mentoring and coaching and teaching them how to do it in the best way, and
tough.
also being answerable to the top. That
Yeah.
transition's very interesting. Often in sales, which is kind of my route where I came through,
Mm.
you would find the best salespeople would be promoted to be sales managers.
Mm.
And it was often the worst thing that people could have done with them,
Yeah.
because they were taking them away from the thing that they did the best
And
and
that they love,
that they
they're
loved.
passionate about.
Yeah. And they didn't realize the different skill sets they then needed to actually be that leader in the team sense.
Mm.
Totally different and really underestimated as well, I think, which I think brings us really nicely onto that piece about leadership.
Mm.
Because when we were talking about doing this podcast, we were saying what fun it's going to be, which it already is. One of the things we talked about was leadership is actually not just leadership of a team. Leadership can very much be leadership of yourself.
Mm.
And I think that was such an interesting point, because a lot of the people who will listen to this podcast may well be solopreneurs running their own businesses, etc. So let's dig into that, because I think it's a really interesting place to start with leadership. What
Yeah.
do you mean when you say to me, leadership actually starts with yourself? What are the key things that we're really talking about here?
It goes a bit back to what I was just saying. When you make that initial transition between being someone who's doing something that they're good at, and generally people are good at something because they love doing it. When you step away from that, the difficulty in detaching yourself from what you really like doing to what your new role is tough. It's really hard. And I think this is where many leaders, we've all heard the term micromanagement, and micromanagement often comes about because the leader just cannot get away, from what they love doing, and consequently end up overpowering other people. In fact, I didn't learn to iron my clothes until I was about 21, because my mum consistently went, "Get out of the way, I can do it quicker,"
Then you didn't learn,
No.
That's the key point, isn't it?
No. And also my complacency as well, in the fact that, do you know what, someone else will do it. So my commitment to it, the fact that, I mean, I know we're talking about ironing now, it's ridiculous, but the principle is the same. How important that was to me was less and less, because there was kind of someone else there who was going to do it. And that's the big thing. I think leaders can often make a huge amount of work for themselves if they don't consider how to manage themselves and think about the output that they truly want for their business through someone else's perspective. How is Flossie on the front line going to answer that phone in the way that you would answer? In your head, it's as simple as, never more than 3 rings. You almost have a pre-recorded script, like one of those tiny little tape machines in your
Yeah.
head. Exactly what you're going to say, and it's worked. It's always worked for you. But she does it differently to you. How do you stop yourself thinking, well, that's not right?
Yeah.
And this is where I think, from a leader's perspective, and I spent many years when I was self-employed talking to small businesses about this, is how little we use our customers' voice and our customers' perception of what we do in order to be able to identify where our own leadership skills are successful and where they're not. You know, we all think we're right, don't we?
Well, we do. And, actually anyone who sits and says, well, no, well, I don't. Well, come on, you probably do.
Yeah.
When you take leadership and you think about the skills we need and maybe the behavior and approach to leadership, I suppose, is where we dig deep, isn't it? When we're doing coaching and training. When you look at an entrepreneur, you have run your own business. You have been that lonely solopreneur. You know what that feels like, Lindsay.
Yeah.
And so all of these, mainly women that I meet who are running their own businesses, how much do you think they actually think about leadership as a topic? Because often they'll say, I'm no good at sales. I'm no good at this. I can't do this. And so we're constantly saying the things we're not good at. And actually is part of leadership as a solopreneur.
Yeah.
Stepping up and saying, I'm going to start leading this business. You're not got any staff. You might have some dogs, but you're going to start leading this business. What does that even look like? What are the things we need to start thinking about, do you think?
Well, I think the first thing that you need to think about is actually is what you're in control of. You know, actually, what are you in control of here? And there's only the one thing ultimately that you're in control of here, and that's you.
Yeah.
And I think once you realise that, and you can emotionally let go of some of the frustrations and the issues that you come up against. And let's face it, as a small business, one person, 5 people, whatever it happens to be, there are a million challenges and barriers that you come up with, and it's consistent. And that consistency of knocks, if you like, can really knock you back. But if you are able to bracket what's going on to begin with in terms of, okay, what am I in control of here? And then what do I have the opportunity to influence? It allows you to take a step back a little bit and not carry quite so much weight and responsibility for making things happen, because genuinely, a lot of the time you can't. But what you can do is influence, you can try, you can persuade, you can look at it through a different lens or a different window, you can get another resource, you can ask for help, there's a number of things you can do, but we get stuck in this kind of, I can't, like you just said, I can't do sales, or I'm no good at bookkeeping, or whatever, the practical things that go with running a business. And, I didn't have the money to go and find somebody to do sales for me. I hated doing sales. Listen to me, doing sales. Like, it's a task,
Yeah. It's how
mad,
people
isn't
look at it very often,
Yeah, doing sales. But I felt that, that's how I was brought up, that it was a function, it was a department. And of course I came out, like a lot of women do, from a large corporate environment where you're brought up to have these different functions that have different skill sets, and you're boxed into wherever you happen to be. So that's what you're good at, without recognizing that the reality is you do have some of those other skills. They're badged differently. They might have a different title. I mean, I worked in customer service for many, many years. It took me a very long time to understand that actually was sales. And yeah, I would say hands down, I can't do sales. I'm too scared to do sales. It's what I did all my life. So it's about standing back a little bit and recognizing that, there's only so much you can actually do, but there's a million things you can influence. When you take that pressure away from yourself, it becomes a lot clearer. And there's other really practical things that you can do in terms of self-leadership as well. Time management is another one. Oh, I've never worked so hard in my life as I have since I've run my own business. How many times do you hear that, and who's in charge of that?
Yeah, I'm working every evening, every weekend.
Exactly.
I've done it. I still do it sometimes now.
I know.
I am totally responsible for it.
There's
You're right.
people listening to this podcast going, listen to her. What is she talking about? I'm so busy. I didn't work every weekend, my business would collapse. No, it would not.
No.
No, it wouldn't. There are ways in which you can balance what you do, and it is about taking the pressure away to have to achieve everything.
Yeah, I love that, Lindsay. It's such good points. So I did a thing around bounce back ability, which I know you and I
Oh
have
yes,
chatted about before, on the back of me losing a business, my Dragon's Den business. And I created the acronym of bounce. And interestingly, some of the things you mention are some of the letters of bounce. So the bounce acronym is breathe, B for breathe,
yeah.
opportunity, which you
Mhm.
just touched on. Actually, what are our real opportunities as opposed to the things that we just get stuck with, that we keep battling with, that actually we have no control over, you know? Understanding is the you. So actually understanding exactly who you are, what your skill set is, what your situation is, what's around you as a support network, you know, and the end necessities. This is
Yeah.
a really big one, I think, because a bit like you've said, if you don't work this weekend, no one's going to die. It'll all be there on Monday morning, funnily enough, you know. So it's the necessities piece, and the C's choice, massive one, and the
Yeah.
E is energy. And the energy bit for me was all about trying to surround yourself with really good people, the right people, you know, that give you good energy as opposed to drain all your energy around. So the acronym of bounce, whilst it's all about resilience and bouncing back, it's actually very, very connected to leadership when we're talking
Absolutely.
like this. I've sort of had this realization. So
Yeah.
I don't know what your thoughts are on some of those, obviously those letters and what they stand for when it comes to
Well,
leadership.
the N, interestingly, the N, you said necessity. So necessity in the sense of what's going to happen. You know, what's the worst thing that can happen? My N has always been non-negotiables. So I have a really limited, or I did when I was working for myself, and actually still do now, a very, very short, limited list of non-negotiables that absolutely must be done. And my ability to kind of breathe again, going back to the
The
B,
B, yeah.
as soon as my non-negotiables are clear, and that might be as simple as check my diary the night before, for example, as a non-negotiable. I just check my diary, the night before. You make up your own, but it allows you to take control, and that's the key thing: is
Yeah,
taking control
yeah.
of where you are.
And the
You
things
know,
you can take control
and
of.
things
Yeah,
you can do.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Take back the control that you can, and recognize all of the other stuff that is not in your control. And that doesn't mean that it's out of your control. It simply means it's not in your control. And that's a very subtle difference.
Yeah,
You can manage it, you can influence it, you just simply can't control it.
yeah, I love that.
It's a subtle difference.
This is linked to something I just thought of actually, about a podcast I listened to the other morning when I was doing my 10,000 steps.
Oh yeah, okay. I know.
Um,
It's just because you're an athlete, you see.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So for the listeners, I'm doing 10,000 steps a day. It's now March when we're recording this, and it's for cancer research. And it has been wonderful and also really tough. Anyway, I digress. I was listening to an amazing podcast which covered the topic of habits. So
Mhm.
again, I think this starts to then feed really nicely into what we've just been saying. So the non-negotiables, in a sense, I imagine, are habits you've created for yourself, which serve you. They serve
Yeah,
you well, you know.
they do.
And this podcast was really good because it was talking about the people who want to change things. You know, I want to change a habit actually because it doesn't serve me. They always talk about it as having to break a habit. Okay. This is so interesting to me. I need to break that habit. So in other words, I'm going to put all this pressure on myself to
Mhm.
stop doing something immediately. Whereas this guy said, actually, what we need to do is change a habit, not break it. So actually, we subtly make it different over a period of time, which then changes the nature of the habit. And I was like, this is brilliant. This is a
Mhm.
revelation. And again, you know, my question, Lindsay, is, are your thoughts about, you know, habits and how they feed into us being great leaders? You know, what's this stuff we hang on to that doesn't serve us when we're looking at the leadership model?
Oh my goodness. Well, as I said before, I think when you come from an environment that's quite corporate or procedural or a fairly, a fairly fixed or a fairly typical large environment into entrepreneurial work, it is just incredible how influenced you are by the learnings that you've quite innocently taken on board over the years. And there, I think for me, certainly, I can only speak personally, some of those habits were incredibly difficult to break. And they're not necessarily task related or procedurally related habits. They're emotional habits. They're habits associated with how someone responds to you, for example, how you perceive someone else's either experience or maybe seniority or success, and how that influences you. Those are the kind of habits that are insidious and dangerous to anyone stepping into a new business, I think. And how do you clear those? It's incredibly difficult to clear those unless you are aware of them. You talked about self-leadership skills right at the beginning, but that self-awareness of what stops you doing things, or what makes you feel uncomfortable, what puts you, I hate that word, out of your comfort zone. I don't you shouldn't have one, really. I mean, it just
Well, no,
should
that's
be
true.
easy, but
It's true.
when you feel that happening, I isolate then and there. What is it? What's going on here? Am I scared of that person? Am I intimidated by them? Do they remind me of somebody that I had to get on side in my previous world who never agreed with me? Does it, those are the kind of self-awareness habits I think that you need to start changing. Remembering that you're good enough, frankly.
And I think it's a really great point you make about them being emotional habits, because you're right. I think there is a difference between those kind of practical habits that we do, but equally the emotional habits, which are often in our subconscious, so we don't even realize we do them. And that's where this awareness piece is
Yeah.
so important, isn't it? And
Yeah.
and I think we have to probably say here that there should be no fear around us asking for help. There should be no fear around us thinking we could have a coach. As I know I'm a coach, it's not a self-promotion thing, it's a fact. I had a coach and I have the same coach, and I go back to her when I need her. She knows that. That's how we operate. And I had a coach at the beginning in 2017 when I started Live It, Love It, Sell It, coming from having worked for people for however many years. And I hated working for people, Lindsey, for lots of reasons, which we can discuss on probably a whole other podcast. However,
Right.
I swore I would never work for someone again in terms of being employed when I started in 2017. And I had this session with her and we were chatting things through. And she said to me, one of the things that you need to change is your language. And this is a very interesting thing, because I was using a corporate language, the way the way I was speaking.
So right.
I wasn't Jules White. I was the business development manager that I had been, or the head of sales who I had been, speaking in a corporate fashion,
I know.
and it was really
I
fascinating. I didn't know, Lindsey. I didn't know.
absolutely couldn't agree with you more. I remember going to my first networking meeting when I started on my own. I joined a really lovely group, and I was very anti women's networking groups because I'd fought so blinking hard over the years, to be honest, to break that. And I stood up and I did my whatever it was,
Minute.
2 minutes, whatever it was, yeah. And I remember them all looking at me like and smiling ever so politely, but I could tell that they had absolutely no idea what I just said. And it's exactly that. I was talking, am I allowed to swear on this? I don't
Yeah,
know.
if you want to, why not?
Talking corporate bullshit. And the words I was using meant absolutely nothing to anybody.
Yeah.
And it was quite disappointing because I'd spent years learning how to interpret stuff like this. It meant nothing, absolutely nothing.
It's so
Wasn't
funny, isn't
any
it?
value whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so I think that you're right. There's no stigma associated with asking for help. Although I think for a lot of people, being able to say, when I walk into, or if I'm going into a meeting with a certain client, I feel intimidated, or I feel, you're not supposed to feel like that. Well, who says so?
Yeah.
Who says that? Because, well, we all do.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and this is where the self-awareness comes from. And if you can tie it back to, aha, I feel intimidated because of, and once you've kind of got that logically mapped out, it's much easier to kind of not think about it anymore then. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean
Yeah.
it goes away, but you just
No.
don't have to consider it so much anymore.
I think the big change for me was I was able to tap into who Jules was and how Jules would say something. I got back to that.
Mm.
I had to work quite hard on it, but it was about, as you say, awareness. When I used a certain word, it was like, well, I actually wouldn't use that word. Jules wouldn't use that word. Jules wouldn't say it like that. And so I started to be able to express myself much more as me. And of course, this is where all my UHP stuff comes from,
Yeah.
Lindsay, because again, I'm passionate about us all being amazingly unique, because I think that's the most interesting thing about all of this. And so I started to write as Jules. I was writing as I would speak. And all of a sudden, people wanted to follow Jules.
Yeah.
People wanted to follow my Facebook group. People wanted to join my Facebook, sales group and blah, blah, blah. And it was like this revelation to me that I could just be me. I could be brave enough to just be me. And it was okay.
Mm.
And for me, I think that was a massive part of me being an entrepreneur, but I'd like to also link it back to leadership again,
I was
because
going to say, this is leading yourself, isn't it?
it is. And our leaders who have to lead teams who may well be listening, I hope there are some, think about this, because this is also important in that role, that you as a leader are human. You as a leader have a personality. You are approachable. You're empathetic,
Mm.
and those things get lost when you go into your corporate role jargon-esque leader, and we've
This
met
is
them.
why, as you know, I'm constantly banging the drum about the difference between a manager and a leader, and how important both of those sets of skills are, and particularly for someone that's operating their own business. You have to be a good manager. Otherwise, who's going to sort your finances out? Who's going to do your planning? Who's going to do your prioritizing? Who's going to review whether something was successful and analyze it? And all of those technical management skills and competencies are critically important. But if it stops there, then your opportunity to really reach for a different level in terms of your business is going to be severely hampered, because leadership is so holistic. It's not just, obviously it starts with yourself and being able to manage yourself, but it's also about being able to lead your clients, lead your team, lead your peers. We think about we hear people talk about thought leaders. I mean, who knew that people would be thought leaders
Yeah.
a few years ago? This is something that's grown up over the last 10 years or so. But if you break it right down, what does that mean? It means that people are following those leaders because they have an inspiring message that other people are really interested in.
Yeah.
They have an inspiring vision or goal or message or whatever it is. And as a small business owner, if you can interpret your business in that way, where people are like, yeah, now I really want it. I want to hear more about this. Okay, there's 1,000 accountants out there, but your accountancy is different because you lead it like this. You lead it with that humanity, that empathy, that understanding, that commitment to supporting people, which are absolute leadership skills as opposed to management skills.
Yeah, gosh, what a great conversation this is. If anyone actually just stopped now and turned off this podcast right now, they would have so much gold already in their pocket from what we've been talking about. And it's very simple stuff, isn't it? That's
Yes.
the thing. It's very simple stuff that applies to us as entrepreneurs running our own businesses alone, because ultimately our team are our clients when you think about it.
Completely.
And then it goes back to the clients that you may be working with who have those leaders who are leading their teams. It's always connected, isn't it? This whole leadership piece. And there's a lot of talk around a leader actually not being that visible sometimes. They're just in the background because they don't need to be at the front of everything. They don't need to be the face of everything. They're the best leaders, aren't they? Aren't they the greatest
Completely.
leaders?
Yeah, completely. I mean, there are leaders who are figureheads, and that's because they enjoy the limelight, and that's great. Think about people like Branson, for example. He's a leader, but thoroughly enjoys being up there with all the glitz and the glamour and everything else. One of the best leaders I ever worked with was Sir Terence Conran, who you very, very rarely saw giving it all the fluff in front of the cameras. But actually, when some of his stores were being refitted, he'd be in there with the decorators and a paintbrush. That's a leader, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? This is
Definitely.
just motivating people from behind and supporting them underneath, as opposed to, military leadership is a different connotation on leadership.
It's a
Those
different
leaders,
function, though, in a sense, when you
is
take
they're
it, isn't it?
first over the top, aren't
Yeah,
they? That's what you
exactly.
expect from a leader.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
then translate that back into our world, and that's just simply role modeling what you want people to do. If you don't show them, then it's not gonna land.
Now,
So
one of the things that we talk about at Ethos Farm, and the things that you've obviously taught me in a sense because of the content that I've delivered with you guys, is that whole triangle, the iceberg effect, and that kind of dictatorial, hierarchical formula that we knew a lot about when we were younger and working in businesses, where the CEO's right at the top, and then the people who really know are right at the bottom, probably under the water. And then Ethos have kind of flipped that over and just started to talk about the fact that it's the people who are actually at the top of this structure, because they're in touch with the customer, they're on the front line, they know what's going on. And I love that whole concept of leadership done in that way, because it's so powerful, isn't it? It's so inclusive.
Absolutely. And interestingly, I mean, in my previous organisation, I used to be called the customer in the room, because I'd always be the one that would say, so how will this appear from a customer's perspective? And everyone will go, oh, hadn't thought about that. And I'm a great big fan of Simon Sinek, and I bang on about his stuff all the time. And he wrote an amazing book called Start with Why. But I think my philosophy for any leader in any size business is to start with your customer, because ultimately they're the important ones. And in that model you were just talking about, yes, of course, it's the frontline teams that are at the bottom in the old way of doing things. Actually, underneath them are the customers.
Yeah, so look how far down they were in that model.
And they pay your wages, you know what I mean? So
it's so true, isn't it? It's so true.
Yes.
We talk a lot about the influence of that customer and how much they can be your marketing team out there in the world, and that does get forgotten a lot, I think.
I think especially now, because customer advocacy has such a wide reach now, and it's so fast. Well, there's two ways of looking at it. Why would you damage it? Because the spread of that reputational damage is immediate. And why wouldn't you take advantage of it? Because they can be, they're your unpaid marketing team.
Yeah, and feedback as well, and being able to always be improving what you're doing comes from those customers, doesn't it, ultimately?
Absolutely.
Interesting, my lovely, absolutely interesting. I guess I would like to sort of round up with a couple of things. First of all, what's your kind of final word on leadership that just leaves us really super inspired? Bit of advice maybe for people out there running their businesses who don't feel like a leader, having listened to this podcast. What's your advice?
Google the definition of leadership And just remember that in your day to day, when you're head down, full of task and process. Just, if you don't have a team, if you are on your own, think about what that means to you. And if you had someone leading you, how would that feel? Because that's what you need to be doing for yourself. If you do have a team of people, and I'm sorry, I am going to paraphrase Simon Sinek, because I think it's probably one of the most powerful statements that I've ever heard, is that being a leader doesn't mean you're in charge. What it means is that you're responsible for those who are in your charge. And that makes a huge difference, I think, is just remembering that.
Brilliant. And I do remember that, because it's part of the training that we deliver, isn't it? That lovely video. Finally, I guess, what's Lindsey up to now for the next 12 months, 2 years? What's going on for you?
Wow. I mean, I am lucky enough, obviously, we've talked about the business, we've talked about Ethos Farm, and I'm lucky enough to be coming to the end of my career, working with an organisation that is as passionate, I guess, about customer experience and leadership as I am. So I'm really lucky to be able to be in that environment right now. But yeah, working gradually towards phased exit into glorious retirement over the next couple of years now.
But what are you going to do when you retire, Lindsey?
Well, I'm going to do a bit of I was going to sing, obviously. I think I've mentioned that already. I'm going to sing. I've never had time to take up a real passion of mine. Maybe this is reflecting back to my athletes days, but I love swimming, and I love outdoor swimming. And there's some great lakes around where I live, so where there's quite a lot. They call it wild swimming now. I'm not sure I'm going to go wild. I'll probably just plop about a bit, but yeah, outdoor swimming I love. Grow things. I'm a ferocious gardener. I'm absolutely zero idea what I'm doing, but oh boy, I love it. I just love it. So
that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to keep you busy, those few things, and being outside in nature and stuff. There's a lot to be said of that.
Yeah, I love it.
I think the walking that I'm doing at the moment makes me really appreciate that, even when it's a bit wet or it's a bit windy or grey. I'm just outside, and that is exhilarating. I think
it's nice, isn't it? I love the smells, and my daughter calls me a tree hugger, but I love odor wet leaf just down behind the ears is lovely.
Well, it's better than odor wet dog, I can assure you. Lindsey, thank you so much for a really interesting conversation. I knew it would be. Thank you for your time today.
You're welcome. You're super welcome. Thanks, Jules. Thanks for inviting me.
Listeners, if you didn't enjoy that human conversation, I don't believe you, for one. But I really hope you did. And I hope you took some little nuggets out of it, and some things that will really help you to think about yourself as a leader and how you're leading your own business. Because ultimately, you can do whatever you want with this. It's amazing. And if you like the podcast, then please press like, leave a comment, and tune in next time to the Human Conversation. Ta-ta for now.
You've just been listening to the Human Conversation podcast with Jules White. To find out more about the other work that Jules does, please visit her website, www.liveitloveitsellit.co.uk. And if you enjoyed the podcast, then please do leave a rating and review on the platform you use to enjoy her show. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.